I'd heard the phrase before, love hurts, usually tossed around like a half-joke, something you laugh about over drinks. But when she said it, leaning against the counter with her arms folded, it didn't sound like a joke at all. It sounded like truth. And maybe that's why I didn't laugh. I work at a small repair shop tucked between a laundromat and a discount bookstore. It smells like motor oil and burnt coffee, and most days blur together. Steady hum of tools, the flicker of the neon open sign, radios from passing cars leaking in when the bay door's up. That morning was no different until she walked in. Her heels clicked against the concrete floor, too sharp for this place, like they belonged in a hotel lobby instead of here. She carried herself like she didn't owe anyone an explanation for why she was here. Mid-40s maybe, hair pulled back in a way that made you notice her jawline, not the style. A crisp blouse under a leather jacket. A woman who knew the weight of eyes on her, and had long since stopped caring. I wiped my hands on a rag, trying not to look obvious. She put her car keys down on the counter, slid them across without a word. There was something deliberate in how she moved. Not slow, not rushed. Just intentional. Check engine light, she said, finally. Her voice was steady, low, like she'd spoken the same way in boardrooms or late-night arguments. Could be a dozen things, I answered. I'll run a scan. She nodded, but didn't step away. Instead, she lingered there, scanning the walls cluttered with old calendars and posters of cars no one drove anymore. Silence stretched. Not uncomfortable exactly, but waited. I felt it pressing down on me while I set up the scanner, like she brought a different kind of air with her. Heavier, sharper. Then, without looking at me, she said it. Love hurts. Just that. Like she was talking to the wall, not me. I should have ignored it. People mutter things all the time. But the way her voice dipped, not bitter, not dramatic, just flat, it landed in my chest like a stone. Before I could stop myself, I said quietly, "Then let me heal you." Her eyes flicked toward me, quick, assessing. The kind of look that doesn't miss a thing. She didn't smile. She didn't scoff. She just held my gaze for a beat too long, then looked away, like she'd already decided not to answer. I busied myself with the machine, pretending my pulse wasn't kicking harder. We went through the motions after that, the diagnostic, the printout, the list of repairs. She asked questions, short and precise. I stumbled once, over-explaining something about spark plugs, and she tilted her head just slightly, not mocking, but noticing. When she reached for her keys again, our fingers almost brushed. Almost. I pulled back too fast, and she paused just a fraction, as if she'd felt the gap. She left with her car, the echo of her heels fading against the concrete. The shop felt quieter after. Too quiet. I told myself it was just another customer, nothing more. But the words I'd spoken without thinking, "Let me heal you," looped in my head like a broken record. I didn't know why I'd said it, or why her silence felt like an answer. All I knew was that for the rest of the day, every time the door opened, I hoped it was her again. She came back 2 days later. Said her car made a noise that didn't sound right. It was mid-afternoon, the shop slow, sunlight bleeding through the bay door in dusty stripes. I told her I'd take a look. She stayed again, arms crossed, leaning against the counter like before, though this time her jacket was draped over a chair. Without it, she looked smaller somehow, less armored. I noticed her hands first. Slim, elegant, but restless. She kept smoothing the crease of her blouse, tapping her nails against the counter, then folding them tightly, as if to stop herself. "You don't have to wait," I said. "It'll take a bit." She gave me a look, the kind that feels like a dismissal and a dare all at once. "I'll wait." So I worked, pretending I didn't hear the soft rhythm of her fingers tapping, pretending I wasn't aware of her watching me more than the wall. After a while, I asked, "Careful. Rough week." A pause. Then, a laugh. Short, sharp, not really a laugh at all. You could say that. Something in it made me look up. Her eyes were tired in a way makeup couldn't hide. Shadows at the edges. A heaviness she carried like it was second nature. She caught me looking, and her lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. More like she'd put on one anyway, because that's what people expected. I turned back to the engine, feeling the air tighten between us. The thing is, I wasn't supposed to notice. Not the faint tremor in her voice when she asked if the repairs would last, like she was asking about more than just a car. Not the way her laugh broke halfway through, or the way she rubbed her temples when she thought I wasn't looking. But I noticed every detail, and noticing made it harder to stay neutral. "You ever feel," she said suddenly, voice low, "like everything you fix just breaks again?" She wasn't talking about the car. My mouth went dry. I wanted to say something, anything, but the silence stretched, heavy. So I only tightened the wrench, pretending the question didn't hang between us. When I finally looked up, she was staring past me, toward the open bay door and the brightness outside. Her posture was straight, her chin lifted, but her hands betrayed her. They gripped the counter too tight, knuckles pale. She must have realized I'd noticed, because she unclenched them, slid them smoothly into her jacket pocket. "Guard back up." When I handed over the keys, our eyes met again. Not long, just a flicker. Enough to feel like something unspoken shifted, pressing harder. She took the keys without a word, but her fingers brushed mine this time. Not an accident. Not entirely. And as she walked out, the sound of her heels echoing down the concrete, I caught myself thinking, if love hurts like she says, why does even her silence feel like a pull I can't resist? It was late when she came in again, rain streaking the windows, the shop quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights. I was locking up, jacket half on, when her headlights cut across the lot. She stepped inside with damp hair sticking to her cheeks, jacket clutched around her. "I'm sorry," she said, breathless, "but the car again." I could have told her to come back tomorrow. Instead, I set my keys on the counter and said, "I'll look." She followed me into the bay. For once, no heels, just flats, her steps softer. The storm outside muffled the world, making the shop feel too small, too intimate. While I leaned over the hood, she lingered near, close enough that I felt the shift of air when she moved. The faintest trace of perfume, sharp at first, then warm, like something that clung to her skin longer than she intended. "You always work this late?" she asked. "Not always." I hesitated, then added, "Not unless someone needs me to." She was quiet. When I glanced over, she was watching me, not the car. Her arms weren't crossed this time. They hung loose at her sides, fingers curled slightly, like she'd forgotten to keep them tense. At some point, I wiped my hands and offered her the rag without thinking. She laughed softly as she took it, pressing it to her palms though they were clean. The sound caught me off guard, softer than before, less guarded. "You're too young to understand," she said after a pause, voice almost drowned by the rain. "Maybe," I admitted. "But you don't look as certain when you say that." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but not in anger. More like she was searching for something she didn't want to find. And for a moment, standing that close, I almost told her everything. How I thought about her after she left. How her silence lingered longer than most people's words. The confession pressed against my chest, ready to break loose. But before I could speak, her phone rang. She flinched. Literally flinched, like the sound hurt. I turned back to the car, giving her space, but her voice carried, low, clipped. A man's name, a few strained words, then silence. When she hung up, she didn't look at me right away. Her mask slipped just long enough for me to see something raw flicker across her face. Fear? Anger? Regret? I couldn't tell. She broke the silence first. "It's complicated." I swallowed. "Yeah, I figured." The storm cracked outside, lights flickering. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. She was close, closer than before, the rag still in her hand, her shoulder brushing mine as she shifted. I could have leaned in. I almost did. But instead, I stepped back, the distance sharp, deliberate. And she let out a breath that sounded too much like disappointment. The storm had passed, but the heaviness hadn't. For days, I thought she wouldn't come back. I told myself I was fine with that. Easier, cleaner. But then one evening, just as the sun was giving up and the sky turned that dull purple gray, she walked in again. No car trouble this time. No excuse. Just her. She leaned on the counter like always, but there was no jacket, no armor. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired sleep could fix, something deeper, bone-tired. "You're closed," she said softly, as if testing me. "Yeah." I answered. But I didn't move to lock the door. She looked around the empty shop, then back at me. The silence stretched. I felt every second of it in my throat. Finally, she said, "What are we doing?" Her voice wasn't sharp. It wasn't even resigned. It was bewildered, like she'd surprised herself just by asking. I laughed under my breath, though there was nothing funny about it. "I don't know." She shook her head slowly, staring at the floor. Whatever this is, it doesn't make sense. I'm too." She stopped herself, lips pressed tight. "Too what?" I asked. Her eyes lifted, locking on mine. "Too old. Too broken. Too much of something you don't understand." I wanted to say she was wrong, that I understood more than she thought. But the words got stuck somewhere between my chest and my mouth. Instead, I stepped closer. Not enough to touch, but enough to make the air between us feel charged, fragile. "You think I don't see you?" I said quietly. "I notice everything." Her jaw tightened, and for a second I thought she might laugh it off, push me away with sarcasm. But she didn't. She just stared at me, a long, unblinking stare that felt like it stripped me down to something bare. The silence that followed was louder than anything we'd ever said. I could hear her breathing, steady but strained. My own pulse drummed in my ears. Every small sound, the tick of the wall clock, the faint drip of rain from the gutter outside, seemed amplified. She whispered, "You make it too easy to forget myself." The words hit me harder than if she'd touched me. I swallowed, throat dry. "And is that bad?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her eyes gave it away. The war between wanting to lean in and needing to step back. We stood like that, suspended, both of us trapped in the space between words and action. Neither moving, neither retreating. When she finally spoke again, it wasn't what I expected. Her voice cracked, almost imperceptibly. "I can't afford for you to mean this much." And then the silence came back, heavier than ever, the kind that didn't ask for a reply, because there wasn't one. The next time she came in, she didn't bother with small talk. She set her phone on the counter, face down, and sat on the stool in the corner like she'd been here 100 times before. She didn't ask me to check her car. Didn't even pretend. I wiped grease from my hands, unsure what to do with the shift in her. Looser somehow, but not relaxed. More like someone who'd stopped running but hadn't caught her breath yet. "You remind me of someone," she said, out of nowhere. The words stopped me mid-motion. "Someone I used to know," she added, eyes fixed on the floor. I waited. She didn't offer more, so I forced myself to keep busy, rearranging tools that didn't need rearranging. "Good thing or bad thing?" I asked finally. She huffed a sound, not quite a laugh. "Both." When I glanced back, her phone had shifted. The screen lit up, just long enough for me to see the background before it dimmed again. A man, smiling, maybe my age, maybe a little older, standing with his arm around her shoulders. I pretended I hadn't seen, but the image burned behind my eyelids. "He died," she said softly, as if she'd caught me looking without turning her head. I froze. Her voice was calm, but only the way calm can be when it's too practiced. "Years ago. Car accident. Wrong place, wrong night." And I never figured out what to do with all the love that had nowhere to go. The room was too quiet. I heard the tick of the wall clock, the faint traffic outside. My chest felt tight, like her words had sucked the oxygen out of the air. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered then. "Not with you. It's unfair. You don't know what it's like to carry someone's ghost." I stepped closer before I could stop myself. Close enough to see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the faint tremor in her hands resting on her lap. "You're wrong," I said carefully. "I don't know your loss, but I know what it feels like to want to give something to someone who won't let themselves take it." She looked up at me then, really looked, like she was weighing my words against all the years she'd spent keeping people at arm's length. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Instead, she turned her phone over again, screen down, sealing it off like a confession she regretted. We didn't move for a long moment. Just silence again, but different this time. Not the silence of avoidance. The silence of something new breaking open. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely there. "I don't know if I'm more afraid of forgetting him or of remembering you." And I had no answer. only the thundering awareness that everything between us had just changed. She didn't come back for over a week. Each day that passed, I told myself that was it, that I'd pushed too close, that the silence between us had finally snapped. The shop felt empty in a way it hadn't before her. Then, on a gray evening, she walked in again. No car excuse. No jacket this time either, just a sweater that looked lived in. She didn't look like the woman who'd first stepped through my door, crisp and untouchable. She looked human, tired, unsteady. I didn't ask why she was there. She didn't offer. Instead, she sat on the same stool, folded her hands in her lap, and stared at the concrete floor like it held answers. After a while, she said, "I keep trying to convince myself this isn't real." Her voice wasn't sharp, not guarded, just soft, like she was surrendering. I leaned against the counter, close but not too close. "And does it work?" Her lips curved, a sad, almost smile. "Not when I'm here." We didn't fill the silence with explanations. No arguments about age, no apologies for ghosts we couldn't change. Just stillness, the kind that settled instead of pressed. Her eyes lifted finally, meeting mine. "I don't want to hurt you," she whispered. "I don't want to fix you," I said, surprising myself. "I just want to be here. With you. However that looks." Something shifted in her then. Not dramatic, not a breaking dam. More like a slow release, the weight loosening just enough. She let out a shaky breath. And for the first time, she didn't pull back. I moved closer, sitting on the stool beside her. Our shoulders brushed, a quiet point of contact. She didn't flinch, didn't move away. Her hand rested on her knee, fingers curling slightly, uncertain. I let mine rest nearby, not touching, not demanding. Just there. A minute passed, maybe more. Then her fingers inched sideways, slow, hesitant, until they brushed mine. That tiny movement carried more truth than any declaration could. I turned my palm up, offering, and she let her hand settle into it. Not gripping, just resting, as if the act itself was enough. We sat like that, two people who didn't fit, who weren't supposed to, who knew better, and for once, didn't fight it. No promises, no future plans, just shared breath in a quiet room. The sound of the wall clock marking time we no longer tried to measure. She leaned her head gently against my shoulder, and with her hand still resting in mine, she whispered, almost to herself, "Maybe healing doesn't mean forgetting." I closed my eyes, holding on to the quiet finality of that truth. Nothing else needed to be said. It's strange, looking back now. I can't remember the exact day when it stopped feeling like she was a customer and started feeling like she was something else. Not a lover, not exactly. Not a friend, either. Something in between, or maybe something beyond those categories. What I do remember are the small things. The way her laugh softened over time, losing that brittle edge. The way her hands, once restless, eventually grew still when they were near mine. The way silence, which used to feel unbearable, turned into a place we could sit together without needing to fill it. I thought I was chasing her at first, but maybe I was chasing the version of myself I only discovered around her. Patient, grounded, unafraid of what people might say. She never asked me to be more than I was, and somehow, that made me want to be. She taught me that love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's in the pauses, the hesitations, the things left unsaid. Sometimes it's just choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. And she learned to stop apologizing for being alive, for carrying her past like luggage she thought no one else could bear. She realized that letting someone close doesn't mean replacing what you've lost. It just means you've found room for something new, even if it looks different than you imagined. We never had the big moment. No sweeping declaration, no fireworks. What we had was quieter. A shoulder leaned on after a long day. A hand held when words wouldn't come. A look that said, "I see you, and I'm not afraid of what I see." People might call it love. Maybe it was. Maybe it still is. But naming it feels less important than living it. Because in the end, what mattered wasn't what we called each other. It was that when the world felt too heavy, we found a place to set it down, together. If you've stayed with me through this story, maybe you've felt something familiar. Maybe you've been on one side of that silence, longing for someone who feels out of reach. Or maybe you've been the one afraid to be touched, afraid to be seen. Either way, I hope you take this with you. Love doesn't always have to hurt. Sometimes it heals, quietly, when you least expect it. And maybe that's enough. So let me ask you, have you ever met someone who changed the way you understood love just by staying in your life? Tell me in the comments. I'd like to hear your story too.